أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من ليلتنا هذه إلى قيام يوم الدين. Respected brothers, sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, it's an honor for me to be in the presence of believers. May Allah reward you for your good intentions in participating in our gathering this evening. I was thinking back, and I believe it was 15 years ago that I had a chance to visit Tucson. It's hard to believe how time flies since that time. But alhamdulillah, it wasn't a planned visit. It wasn't something that I was anticipating, but Allah has His own ways, and here I am tonight with you. I thank you very much. I spend most of my time in a full-time Islamic school, and in the school, one of the things I do is I teach, and so I get a chance to spend time in the classroom with students. So one of the things that I've learned to do is that when I'm speaking and people are kind of zoned out, then I stop speaking as well, because I hate to bore people. I hate it when somebody's just going on, and so I hope that inshallah I won't bore you tonight, and I hope that inshallah you'll be giving me that feedback that will allow me to have the encouragement to continue. Also, I personally enjoy hearing speakers who are very eloquent. I'm not one of them, but I also enjoy hearing speakers who have something practical to offer. And I'm a pretty practical person. I come from an engineering background, actually, and so I'm hoping that through the course of this speech, you'll see that I'm trying to offer some practical points. Like, it's not just a thing of like, let's come and remember, let's come and commemorate, but let's come and inshallah try to take something away as well. Some homework, some inspiration, something for us to work on, inshallah. Now, what are we here for? At the end of the month of Safar, we have some occasions that we want to commemorate. The month of Safar, as you know, is a month where there's a lot of sad occasions, including the imprisonment of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, the events that took place in Sham. But we're here to commemorate a different event, which is the passing of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Could you say salawat? Okay, so brothers and sisters, we're here to commemorate the passing of Rasulullah. In order to honor him and show our love for him, let's recite a united, beautiful salawat ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. So the chai had its effect, right? The tea had its effect. Good. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So we're also commemorating the martyrdom of our second Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, and also at the end of the month of Safar is the anniversary of the martyrdom of our beloved Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. When it comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, there is a famous ayah in the Quran which all of you have heard before, from Surah Al-Qamar, where Allah Ta'ala says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, wa innaka la'ala khuluqin azim. Indeed, O Prophet, you have an excellent character. And what I want to talk about tonight is that concept, but from a very particular angle, not just generally. Right? We all know that our Prophet was great in his character. We know that if you name any great characteristic that you can find in anyone, we know that that great characteristic is contained in our Prophet in the most excellent way. That's something which is given. In fact, we can take it one step further. If you can think of any attribute of Allah that signifies beauty and perfection and nobility and majesty, you can find that attribute reflected in the character of our Prophet in a way that is not reflected in any other human being. Right? That is the status of our Prophet. But I don't want to talk about it in general. I want to talk about it from a very specific perspective. And that is the perspective of what happens when you're put in a tight corner and when things get tough. In those situations, what is your character like? I'll give you a quick story. Okay, it's a story maybe you've heard before. There is a book that is famously known in the Hausa as one of the main texts in ethics and character. It's called Jami al-Sa'adat of Marhum Mahdi Naraqi. He was a great scholar, and he wrote this book about how do you be like a great person in different ways when it comes to the science of your heart and how do you get these good characteristics, how do you stay away from bad characteristics. So say salawat. Alright, is this better?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, this great scholar, he writes this book, and it becomes famous in the Hausa. This is back maybe, 100 years ago or something. And when the book becomes famous, the author becomes famous as well. And one day, this author of this book in ethics, he travels to Najaf, and he goes for ziyarah of Amirul Mu'mineen. And as part of that ziyarah, it was custom at that time that the great ulama, the great scholars, that they would visit one another. So the custom was that if a great scholar came into town, that the other greats who are local, they would go and visit the great one and kind of welcome the great scholar. So when Mullah Naraqi, the author of this great work in ethics, comes to visit, all the great ones come in and they start welcoming him. You're very welcome here, ahlan wa sahlan, we value you, we value your work. But there's one of the great scholars, Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, who doesn't come and visit him. So Mullah Naraqi, he realized that Sayyid Bahrul didn't visit him, and so what he does is that he goes to one of his classes in the Hausa, and he sits as a student in that class. And when you sit as a student in a class, it's a sign of humbleness. So he sits there, and Mullah Sayyid Bahrul Ulum notices him there, but he doesn't really pay attention to him that much. Then, at some point later in his trip, Mullah Naraqi goes to the home of Sayyid Bahrul Ulum to pay a visit to him at his home. And when he arrives there, there's other people there, and once again Sayyid Bahrul Ulum doesn't pay too much attention to him. But Mullah Naraqi is, he sits, he's kind of doing all the things that he has to do as a visitor. After some time, Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, he goes to Mullah Naraqi, and this time he's very welcoming. He hugs him, he greets him with respect, he asks him to sit next to him, he speaks with him. And then he asks him a question. He says that maybe you're wondering, why is it that I'm treating you like this right now, but I didn't come and see you when you came into town. When you participated in my class, I didn't welcome you. When you came into my home, I didn't show you any special regard. You might be wondering what happened. So he tells him that I had read your book and I was aware of your stature, and I respected that. But there's one time when somebody writes about something. There's sometimes when you talk the talk, right? But there's another thing to walk the walk, right? So I wanted to see that those things that you've written in your book about ethics and character, do you actually practice them or not? And what I saw is that you are somebody who wrote your book after you had worked on your character. It was a test. You first learned how to be this person and then you wrote about it. And that's something that I honor and I respect. Truly, you are an alim who is amil. Not just somebody who knows, but somebody who practices what they know. Now, what was the test here? The test was that not just that whether Mawlana Raqi is going to have good akhlaq, not just that he's going to be smiling and welcoming and that type of thing. Is he going to have a positive attitude and a good, let's say good behavior with somebody who's treating him in a way which maybe is below his sha'n, below his status? In that case, what is he going to do? Is he going to say that, oh, I should be respected more than that? If he's going to treat me like that, I'm not going to go see him, I'll disrespect him, so on and so forth. But he saw that no, he had the perfect etiquette despite whatever was being done to him. So this is very much related to my topic, which is that how do we have good ethical behavior even when the times are tough? And this comes up all the time. There are times when, for example, financially things are good, right? We have all the money that we need and more, and we can buy whatever we want to buy, and things are going well, and then suddenly, I don't know, the stock market crashes, Bitcoin plunges, and we're suddenly left with very little, and now things are tight. Right? What do we do at that time? Do we still have the same sense of reliance on Allah? Do we have the same sense of ease within us? Are we able to smile at our family members, or are we really stressed out all the time? Another example, we have a business partner and things are going well with our business. We invite each other at one another's homes, everything is fine, and suddenly there's a conflict. Maybe there's an opportunity for one of them to maybe make some money that the other one doesn't have that opportunity, so they go for it, or something, right? There may be this disagreement about how to run the business, and suddenly that type of partnership begins to dissolve. And before, these two were so tight, and now they no longer talk to each other. And we've seen this even sometimes among blood brothers. They are in a business together, and then something bad happens to the business, and then that's it, they stop talking to each other. They split, right? So how do you have good akhlaq at the times which are tough? And when we go to this ayah of the Quran, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, the great mufassir, the great commentator of the Quran, Allama Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Tabatabai, in his tafsir, he says that even though the ayah is speaking in a general sense, there's no conditions, it's not saying that the Prophet has good akhlaq, good character in this situation or that situation. What we can understand from the context of the ayah is that particularly in social situations, when dealing with other people, the Prophet had the most excellent of behavior and conduct. Now, what I'd like to do tonight is to explore this a little bit in more detail. And the way I want to do that is by taking inspiration from this famous saying that you've definitely heard before. One time, one of the family members of our Prophet was asked, "How did you find the Prophet?" And the answer that was given was that his character was the Quran. If you want to know the Prophet, then you look at the Quran. So what I want to do is I want to look at the Quran, and I'm going to compare and contrast. We're going to see how certain people, how they behaved when they were in tight situations, versus how the prophets and our prophet behaved. And we're going to compare and contrast and see what kind of characteristics they showed. So it's a very practical exploration tonight. And the reason why we're doing this is not just to look back at history, but rather we're looking at ourselves and trying to see what inspiration we can take when it comes to our lives, when it comes to our dealing with other people, whether it be our family members, whether it be our business partners, whether it be our colleagues, our community members, our parents, our siblings, etc. Now sometimes people say that why is it that we take examples of Ahlul Bayt and try to relate them to us? Aren't they so sublime and so high up there that there's no point in even trying to see us with respect to them? I mean, after all, they're ma'soom. So how is it that we are expected to be like them and take inspiration from them? And the answer is very simple, that one of the great scholars, he puts it this way. He says that imagine that, in fact, this is narrated from Allama Tabatabai himself. He says that imagine that you have somebody who's standing at the top of a mountain, and the path to get there is a narrow path and it has a lot of turns. It's not an easy path. And that person at the top of the mountain is calling you up and saying, come towards me. You don't have to necessarily get to where they are. What they want you to do is to take their path. And just try. Go in that direction. See how far you can go. After all, لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. Meaning that we can only do what we can do, but at least we can try to make our way up that path. And that's what we're trying to do tonight, inshallah. So when I go to the Quran and I look and see, how is it that people deal with conflict? What is their akhlaq like? How do people deal in the situations where they feel like they are in a tight corner? How do they respond? I want to give you some few examples here. First example is from the people of Noah, people of Nuh alayhi salam. When Nabi Nuh alayhi salam is speaking truth and speaking logic, and he's making sense, and he's such a humble person and so caring and so kind, some of those guys start to get worried, and they are going to launch their attack. And what approach do they take? If you go to Surah Hud, Allah Ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, فقال الملأ الذين كفروا من قومه ما نراك إلا بشرا مثلنا وما نراك اتبعك إلا الذين هم أراذلنا بادي الرأي وما نراكم علينا من فضل بل نظنكم كاذبين. So we see that these people are responding to Nuh. How are they responding? Are they reasoning with Nabi Nuh? Are they presenting proofs and evidence and arguing with him on a logical basis? Not at all. What are they doing? They're making fun of the people who are following Nabi Nuh alayhi salam. They're mocking them. And they're calling them people who are simple-minded. They are liars, right? And then they're looking at themselves and they're looking at them and they're saying that, well, you guys aren't better than us, right? It's about a thing of like, well, who's better than who, right? There's a lot of us and you and comparison there. They also are saying that we don't see you anybody but a human being like us, right? Like you're nothing special, right? You know, whatever you have, we have as well, and that's what it is. Okay, that's one example. I'll give you another example. This one is from the dialogue of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. Nabi Ibrahim was brought up by his uncle. His name was Azar, or Azar. And this uncle was an idol worshipper. Not just an idol worshipper, he was an idol carver. He was like a devout devotee of the idol temple. So when Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam is reasoning with him and kind of arguing his point and trying to point out the flaws in believing in idols who can't hear you, who can't see you, who can't help you, who aren't even aware of you, what is his response? He says in Surah Maryam. قال أراغب أنت عن آلهتي يا إبراهيم لئن لم تنتهي لأرجمنك وهجرني مليا. When he gets upset, when he feels threatened, what does he do? He responds by threatening violence. He says, I'm going to stone you. Right? Now this is somebody who has the position of like a son for him. Now what father would imagine stoning his own kid? Right? You got to be pretty brutal to do that. But this is the akhlaq of the jabbareen. This is the ethical practice of those tyrants. Right? When they are cornered, when they feel like they're going to lose, what do? They resort to violence. Not only that, he tells him wahjurni maliya, meaning that get away from me for a long time. Right? I don't want to have anything to do with you. You know, you've heard of the silent treatment, right? It happens sometimes in families where you have a father or your mother, maybe a husband and wife, and they get upset at one another or something, and then they're like, okay, that's it, I'm not going to talk to you. Right? Sometimes we have people coming up and they say that my person XXX, whatever it is, like maybe their father, whatever you want to put it in, their family member hasn't talked to me for months. Right? I'm like, what? Like, they haven't talked to me for months. Why? Because, I don't know, they got upset because I burnt their food or something like that. I'm like, what? Right? But that's the reality. And I haven't had just one person tell me that. Right? Sometimes it seems like it's a common thing that people use these tactics as ways of responding when they're upset and they want to somehow lash back at the person who they're upset at. Okay? Let's go to another example. This example is of Nimrud. Nimrud is a tyrant. And he is the tyrant at the time of whom? Ibrahim alayhi salam. So Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam again is reasoning with him and he doesn't like it. So Nabi Ibrahim tells him, إِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ Surah Al-Baqarah, إِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّيَ الَّذِي يُحْيِي وَيُمِيتُ. My Rabb is the one who gives life and who gives death. Right? If you want to, you don't need, it's not hard to see the presence of God in this universe. Right? Who else created the system of life and death? If you don't believe there's a God, then when death comes to you, just stand up and say no. Right? Just resist it. And we know that we're whether or not you like, you're going to submit to God at that point. Right? You might not submit to Him before that, but you're going to definitely submit to Him at that point, because you don't have a choice. رَبِّيَ الَّذِي يُحْيِي وَيُمِيتُ. What does he respond? قَالَ أَنَا أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ. I am the one who gives life and who gives death. Meaning that what? That even if it takes, what does he do according to tradition? He takes some people and he says that you're free to go. Maybe they're prisoners or slaves. And he takes another group and he kills them. Meaning that what? He shows his brutality. You know, he shows violence. Again, violence is one of the techniques of the Jabbareen. And then we go to another example, which is the example of the Pharaoh. What does the Pharaoh do when he's threatened by Nabi Musa alayhi salam in Surah An-Nazi'at? فَقَالَ أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. He says that I am if you're talking about the Rabb, you're talking about the nourisher, the nurturer, the Lord, right? I am the Lord and I'm higher than any Lord out there, right? So what does he look to? He wants to talk himself up, right? I'm the one who's big. It's all about me, right? And this is one of the techniques of the people. This is the akhlaq and the ethics of the people of the Zalimeen, right? That when they get cornered, they start talking about how great they are, right? In Surah Zukhruf, similarly, when Fir'aun feels threatened from Musa, what does he say? Am ana khayrun? Right? Don't you see that I'm the one who's better? Am ana khayrun min hadha alladhi huwa mahin wa la yakadu yubin. Meaning what? That who's better, me or this? Yeah, this wretched person here who can't even speak properly. What do you think, right? Here I am, I'm the eloquent Pharaoh, and this guy can't even speak properly. He speaks with a lisp, or he speaks with a little bit of a, whatever, he had some type of speech thing. فَلَوْلَا أُلْقِيَ عَلَيْهِ أَسْوَرًا. Look at the way he's dressed, right? How can he be somebody who's legit? right? Min dhahabin, let him wear gold bracelets or something. أو جاء معه الملائكة مختلفين, or he should be at least escorted by a group of angels or something like that. But this simple clad, shepherd, how can he be a prophet from God? What do you think, right? So what does he resort to here? What is this technique called? It's called when somebody is, again, cornered, they start making fun of the other person, right? The way they look, the way they are, right? Sometimes we hear this. We hear that even in domestic disputes. Recently, we hear these things about sometimes people refer to, like, when they get upset, they're like, oh, your parents raised you to be like this or like that. So, they humiliate them, right? They make up, because, everyone, one of the ways you can hurt somebody is by attacking their parents. Right? It really hurts, right? Because you have something about, you don't want to hear bad things about your parents, even if they're true, right? So when somebody wants to attack you, like, one of the ways they can do that is by talking about your mother or your father. And then you want to make it doubly, then you say that, oh, look at the way your mother or father raised you, like this. It's like, like you're hitting them with a double punch, okay? And sometimes that's a technique that's used, okay? And brothers and sisters, these attacks and this approach and this type of ethics were not just displayed in the times of the previous prophets, they were displayed at the time of our prophet as well. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about our prophet. I don't usually like speak for a very long time, unless like people are really like excited. But I'm not going to, inshallah, trouble you tonight. So what does our prophet say? What does our prophet say? Okay, so Surah Al-Furqan is one of the surahs in the Quran, which it's a really beautiful surah if you want to become closer to Rasulullah, because you see kind of the struggles that he was going through in terms of his people. It's one of the latter surahs where you hear kind of the things. So what are the types of things that they would say to the Prophet? مَا لِهَذَا الرَّسُولِ يَأْكُلُ الطَّعَامَ وَيَمْشِي فِي الْأَسْوَاقِ. What's wrong with this Prophet? Call himself a prophet, right? He walks around in the markets, he eats food. لَوْلَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْهِ مَلَكٌ فَيَكُونَ مَعَهُ نَذِيرًا. Let there be an angel with him. أو يلقى إليه كنز. He should have a massive treasure. أو تكون له جنة يأكل منها. He should have a traveling garden with him that he can always take from, even though we're in the desert. Something magical like that. وقال الظالمون إن تتبعون إلا رجلا مسحورا. And then they add on top of that he is mashoor, that he is somebody who's bewitched. So they call names, right? They question his credentials, right? They hit him in every single way. They try to find any type of thing, any type of point. But what they never will do is they'll never speak logically. They'll never sit down and say that, let's talk this through, right? If I'm wrong, then I'm going to accept that I'm wrong and I'm going to follow you. They never submit to the truth. What they do is they start attacking personally. And then what does Allah tell the Prophet in that same surah? He says, Allah says, "Unzur kayfa darabu lak al-amthal, fadallu fala yastati'una sabila." Look at, they keep on making these amthal, these likenesses. They call you mashoor, they call you this, they call you that, you call you that, whatever, all these things, and they're gone, they're lost, they're not finding like the right way. Okay? And then Allah comforts him. Now, here's something interesting, brothers and sisters, for you. The Quran describes all these techniques of those people, what they do. They talk about themselves, they make fun, they ridicule, they humiliate, they threaten violence, they make fun of people who are with that person, every single one of those techniques. But never in the Quran do we see a single prophet retaliating and responding in the way that he was being attacked. And this is what we're talking about, khuluqin azim. That when somebody is being dealt with in a way which is not proper, but they're able to still respond in the proper way. And that's something which is incredible. I'm going to give you one specific example. This is from Surah Al-Tahrim. It's a really beautiful example which shows us how our Prophet had khuluqin azim. There was an incident that happened, and it was a domestic thing, meaning something in the home. But I don't want to go into the details of it. But what happened is that there were two of the wives of the Prophet who decided to kind of conspire and make trouble for the Prophet, okay, about something that took place. They were jealous or whatever. Now, what happened was that the Prophet was informed about their conspiracy against him by Allah himself. And the Prophet goes to one of them and he confronts his wife and he asks her about what she had done. Now, this was not a small thing, okay? The Quran, when it talks about conspiring against the Prophet and troubling the Prophet, the Quran speaks about it, and it's one of those sins which is called the kaba'ir, meaning that there are certain sins for which the fire of hell is promised. One of them is this, when it was a very severe thing, because the last thing you want is when you're facing enemies all around in the form of, the unbelievers, and then the other people, and then the mushrikeen, and then the munafiqeen, and then suddenly in your own home you're facing problems as well too, right? So the Quran clearly warned the Prophet's family members, never conspire against him, never trouble him, right? If you do, there's adabun alim, there's painful punishment that's awaiting you. But they went and they did it, okay? So now, how is the Prophet going to deal with this person from his family who has betrayed him, right? What would we do, right? What would we do when we have a family member who disappointed us? Okay, what does the Prophet do? The Quran describes it. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. وَإِذْ أَسَرَّ النَّبِيُّ إِلَى بَعْضِ أَزْوَاجِهِ حَدِيثًا. So remember when the Prophet he secretly told one of his wives something. فَلَمَّا نَبَّأَتْ بِهِ وَأَظْهَرَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. And then she went and she told somebody else, and Allah told him that that's what she did. عَرَّفَ بَعْضَهُ وَأَعْرَضَ عَنْ بَعْض. Meaning what? Meaning that the Prophet told, when he confronted her, he just told her a little bit about what she did. He didn't go through all the details, and he didn't make her sort of admit to everything that she had done. Now why? Right? Why would we'll come back to that in just a second here. فَلَمَّا نَبَّأَهَا بِهِ قَالَتْ مَنْ أَنْبَأَكَ هَذَا. When he told her about it, what was her response? Did she apologize? Right? Did she say that I am so sorry for putting you through this difficulty? Right? I was wrong. Right? Not at all. What is her only? She's like, who told you about this? Right? Now, again, the Prophet could have been furious. Like, after all that, the only thing you have in mind is who did it and who told on you? Right? But what does the Prophet say? He says, نَبَّأَنِيَ الْعَلِيمُ الْخَبِيرُ. Okay, he says the one who informed me is Al-Alim Al-Khabir. Al-Alim means the one who is all-knowing. Al-Khabir means that he knows even, what's the details. Even what is hidden, the what is in the open and what is in hidden. Okay, which is who? Allah Ta'ala. Now, what is this reflecting to us? What's reflecting to us is that the Prophet had what's called adabul hudur, meaning that there is a certain type of character that somebody can only display only when they feel the presence of Allah. When they know that they are in the mahdar, in the presence of Allah, they can only speak in a certain way because they're embarrassed and they're ashamed of speaking in a different way. A normal person would have blown up at that time. He would have been like, you're out of here, right? I'm done with you. But what does the Prophet say? نَبَّأَنِيَ الْعَلِيمُ الْخَبِيرُ. He's so much in love with Allah that even there when he speaks about Allah, he does so with these terms of magnificent characteristics of Allah. Right? This reminds us of, even we see, when we said, what was the response of the uncle of Ibrahim to Nabi Ibrahim? He says, La arjumannak, I'm going to go and I'm going to stone you. What was the response of Ibrahim to that? Did he say, I'm going to stone you back? Right? You're going to mess with me, I'm going to mess with you? Right? You made fun of me, I'm going to make fun of you? Sometimes we see that in our families. Right? You're going to talk about my mother, let me talk about your mother? Right? No. How does he respond? قَالَ سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكَ سَأَسْتَغْفِرُ لَكَ رَبِّي. You're telling me la arjumannak, I'm telling you astaghfiruk. You're telling me I'm gonna stone you, I'm telling you I'm gonna ask Allah to forgive you. Right? And then he says why? Innahu kana bi hafiya. Right? Because my Lord is one who is hafi. You know what hafi means? What does hafiya mean? Protecting. It has protection in it. Love. Detailed love. Caring. Like caring about every single part, everything. You know, one thing after another, he takes care of it. That's the way Nabi Ibrahim saw the presence of Allah. So if he sees that Allah is treating him that way, then he wants to treat his uncle in that way as well. Right? That Allah takes care of me and shows me love, I'm going to show you love as well. Right? And you see our Prophet, he doesn't blow up, he doesn't he says that Nabba'ani al-alim al-khabir. It shows how the Prophet was so grounded in his character that nothing could shake him up. Even when things were that bad at home, he still maintains his dignified character. Why? Because of his sense of the presence of Allah. Now, how do we get there? Right? How do we do that? I don't want to go into, maybe tomorrow, inshallah, if Allah gives us tawfiq, I'll go into a little bit more detail, but I just want to mention one practical point right now, which is that one of the ways we get there, or let me say what we shouldn't do. Sometimes what we do is we get into the habit of defining our relationships according to the way that we want them to go. And this is something that comes from the Western culture. We be careful about this. What does typical Western culture say? And this is something that I can prove to you that it's taught to even our children. Right? I've seen this in children's books. I'm involved in education. That's my field right now. In education, we see that at a very young age, children are taught that you should draw your boundaries where you want to draw them. The heck, if I'm going to cancel you, if I don't want you, right, in my life, I'm going to cancel you, and then the heck with you, you're there and I'm here, I'm gone, you're gone. That's it, we're done, right? It can be a friend, it can be your mother or father, that I'm done with you, right? That's the type of thing we're taught. Whereas Islam tells us what? That you have huquq. You have rights. There are those rights you have on others, but there's rights that others have on you. Right? It's not about just me. I'm not making myself the axis of determining what's right and what's wrong. My basis is what Allah Ta'ala wants on me. So that's one thing to think about, that how do I define my relationships and my duties in those relationships? Is it according to my wants and my preferences, or according to the wants and preferences of Allah Ta'ala? So these are some points that inshallah I wanted to present tonight for us to reflect upon as we look at this idea of having excellent character even at those times which are difficult. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Inshallah, I'll say a few words about the occasion, the musibah for tonight, and then inshallah I'll leave you. Inshallah, I'll stop talking. So we're here tonight to commemorate the passing of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's begin by sending our salam to Rasulullah. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulullah, ya Abul Qasim, ya Rasulullah, ya Imam al-Rahman, يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. Brothers and sisters, we're told in hadith that when you go for ziyarah of Rasulullah, the first thing you should say is Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You say that 3 times. Why do we say Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un 3 times? Because when we have a great musibah that comes to us, a great tragedy, a great conflict, a great difficulty, then we turn to Allah and we say that, oh Allah, it's from you that we originate and it is to you we return. We're told that when we go to Rasulullah, we should say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. أصبنا بك يا حبيب قلوبنا فما أعظم المصيبة حيث فقد انقطع عنا والوحي وحيث فقدناك. Meaning that what a great musibah it was when you left us and the divine revelation was cut off and you were no longer in our presence. Rasulullah was very great. Rasulullah was magnificent. His presence among the people was like the sun. Without him, it was like darkness. What sort of difficulties there were for Rasulullah towards the end. How he saw the people in front of his own eyes, they began to disobey him. We're told that there was one time when Rasulullah wanted to write something for the people, after which they would never go astray. And so Rasulullah, when all of them are gathered in his home, he says that bring me some pen and a paper so that I can write for you something after which you will not be deviated and you will not be misguided. And rather than listening to Rasulullah, one amongst them stands up and he cries out, Inna rajula la yahjur. This man is just saying nonsense things. What does it mean for him to write something at this time? And Rasulullah realized that even if he were to write something, they would question him. This is Rasulullah, and they would question him and say that even what he is writing is no longer valid. So he just abandoned the idea of writing it down for them. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in those last times, in those last moments, he was between consciousness and between sickness, and sometimes he'd be awake, sometimes he'd be asleep. But we know that his dear family members were gathered near him at that time. We're told that at one time Rasulullah receives a special visitor. Who is it that's visiting Rasulullah? It is Jibreel alayhi salam. Jibreel alayhi salam is telling him, Ya Rasulullah, I have come to inform you that Malikul Maut is seeking permission to come and speak with you. Never before has Malikul Maut, has the angel of death asked permission to see anyone, and never again will he ask permission to see anyone, but for you he is asking permission to enter upon you. Rasulullah gives him permission to enter upon him. When Malikul Maut comes to Rasulullah, he says to him that Allah has sent me and he has told me to obey you, Ya Rasulullah. If you give permission, I will take your soul and you will meet Allah. But if you say no, then I will retreat and I will not take your soul. Rasulullah asks him, O Malikul Maut, is what you're saying true, that you will obey my command? And he says that yes, indeed, you command me and I will obey. Jibreel alayhi salam tells him, Ya Rasulullah, Allah mushtaqun ila liqa'ik. Allah is desiring to meet you. Rasulullah tells Malikul Maut, and then in that case I give you permission to take my soul. Jibreel alayhi salam says to him, Ya Rasulullah, after this I will no longer come on the earth because you are the only reason that I desired to come to the earth. But with your departure, I have no more desire or reason to come and visit this earth. Rasulullah is gathered with his near ones. One of them is Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam. Fatima alayha salam is trying to console herself. She is reminding herself of the greatness of Rasulullah, and she is quoting some poetry of Abu Talib alayhi salam regarding the merits of Rasulullah. And then Rasulullah hears her and he says to her, Oh Fatima, it would be better if instead that you were to quote the ayah of the Quran, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قد خلت من قبله الرسل أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم. That this is the Prophet Muhammad is a messenger of Allah, and before him there have been those who have passed. He too will pass. If he passes, then are you going to turn away and go backwards and reject all that he has taught you? Is this what you're going to do? Fatima alayhi salam cannot contain her grief. She is seeing her beloved father in front of her own eyes suffering so much because she knows what they are going to do to him, to his family. After he leaves this world, Rasulullah calls her near to him. And those around see that Fatima alayhi salam, for a moment, her grief lifts. It's as if a smile comes to her face. Later on they ask her, they say, "Oh Fatima, why is it that we saw that you were crying and then for a moment it seems that you were smiling?" She says that my dear father told me, and he told me that after me, "Oh Fatima, you will be the first amongst my family to leave this world and you will be reunited with me." And the thought of being reunited with Rasulullah was enough to give me that happiness. And then Rasulullah sees Imam Hassan and Hussein enter upon him. And Imam Hassan and Hussein see their grandfather, they rush to him and they put themselves on his chest. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is telling them that, please, if you can give your grandfather some space, maybe it's better if you separate yourselves from him. But Rasulullah says that, no, oh Ali, let them be with me, let them be close to me. They take benefit from me and I take benefit from them. And then Rasulullah tells them that after me, my ummah will do dhulm to them, they will do injustice to them. What is Rasulullah foreshadowing? What is he talking about? Is he talking about the time when Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam, when he has left this world, he has become a shaheed, rather than allowing him to be buried in peace, they will take their arrows and they will fire their arrows even at the taboot, even at the coffin and the body of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. They will not let him go in peace. Or is he talking about the time when Imam Hussein alayhi salam, after having faced all those tragedies and difficulties, after having seen his own family members martyred in front of his eyes, they will continue to attack him, they will continue to fire their arrows and throw their stones, they will continue to attack him with their swords until that man will perch himself on the chest of Imam Hussein and gather his beard, and he will then stroke with his dagger and sever the head. Is Rasulullah talking about the time when his people from his own ummah, they will take their horses and they will trample the bodies of their martyrs? And Zainab alayhi salam, when she is seeking the body of Imam Hussein, perhaps she is wondering, where is the body of her brother? Why is it no longer recognizable? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.
صلوات
اللهم صل على أحسن شيخ.